How should we navigate gender roles in society where both men and women have to work?
Maybe when you have spent the night together, afterwards, that's when you talk, because that's when they're most vulnerable. And
when trust has been broken, how do you mend the relationship?
We're all flawed people, and I recognize I'm far more flawed than Cheryl. You know what I'm saying? Far more.
I can't open up to my wife about my deep feelings. She dismisses me. Because of this, I don't open up to her.
Wait. But sometimes your wife is tired because she's doing everything. Yeah.
My wife and I would like to incorporate a bit of dirty talk in the bedroom. We don't say anything that we would consider sinful, nor do we swear. But we want to know if Ephesians 4:29 would extend towards spoken in the bedroom.
I remember speaking to the husband about it, and he rebuked me. The boy cussed me clean.
The man, there it is. Return of the man. Once again, return of the man. Watch my flow. You know that I'll be back. Here I am. Return of the man.
Hello my beauts, welcome back to my channel. This is the last video for Marriage Retreat 2024. It is the well-seasoned couples Q&A, and it takes place on the last night of every retreat. The questions are given anonymously, but I'm sure some of us can relate to some of these questions. I do hope that if you are going through it, that you receive some guidance from this video. There were 33 questions all in all, but we're just going to go through 29 today. I think the pastors did a really good job of even going through the 29. So thank you to Pastor Jay, Pastor Jamil, and Sister Yinka for their time. And finally, I apologize for the sound quality. We were sitting down eating whilst listening to the Q&A, so there was quite a lot of noise from the cutlery, from us speaking, but I've really tried to hone in on the conversation so you can hear the answers. I have personally read out the questions because it was just so loud when Pastor Jay was reading out the questions. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you in my next video.
So I'm just going to throw this over to Pastor Jamil and Sister Yinka. And the first question is...
Question 1. How would you respond to in-laws that feel entitled to ask invasive questions about childbearing and raising your children?
That's a good one. I like it.
So I think when it comes to in-laws, I think you should leave it to your spouse to speak to the in-laws.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you want to be confronting in-laws about those issues.
Yeah, well, just
so for instance, if my mother is giving my wife problem, I need to speak to my mother, and I allow my mother to have to speak to my wife. And so I think that's how you address it. You allow the spouse to speak to their parents, whoever they are, about the situation.
When I first got married, my mom's great, but my mom's strong-willed. Pastor Carnegie said to me, you got to protect your wife from your mom. And I do believe that. So in terms of agreement, you got to agree beforehand, and then talk to the parents, because sometimes parents can be overly invasive, but sometimes they have genuine questions. You just interpret it as invasive. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes son-in-law, daughter-in-law can be very prickly over really minor issues, and parents-in-law have to walk on eggshells. I get it. Sometimes we gotta consider ourselves as well. We're oversensitive about issues, you know.
Trigger warning, the next question centers around abuse. If this is a difficult topic for you, please skip to 5:33. Question 2. I was abused before marriage, which has somewhat had an impact on our intimacy. What do I do if there are some things my husband wants to do, but I don't enjoy because of the abuse? Do I just do it to please him, but deep down not want it or enjoy it? Or should he understand and not ask to do those things?
I think with this one, the communication is key. And so I think you have to communicate that to your husband. And on the side of the husband, I think you need to have understanding. And so some of these things take time to navigate. You know, sometimes you want an instant answer. But abuse is something that takes time to heal. And so I think if your wife is struggling with it, then you need to have that conversation. You communicate to your husband what it feels like, or the difficulty you're having as a result of the abuse. But then at the same time, the husband, I think you need to have understanding. Kind of dwell with your wife, the scripture says, with understanding. And so you kind of need to put yourself in her position, so to speak, and kind of see where she's coming from. and then show her grace, and then in time, you guys pray about it, and in time, hopefully she can heal, and then you guys can just enjoy your marital bliss as God wants it to be.
Yeah, I would agree. The issue is that when it comes to hurt, it's not an easy process. You know, abuse is never easy. And some people never recover from that. So that's why I would suggest you speak to a marriage counselor or your pastor to see what you can do to work through this. But you can't just leave it like it, you know?
Question 3. How do you balance a situation where you as a man desire sex and your wife restrains from it with excuses?
There is no balance. There is no excuses. Actually, I'm gonna let my wife answer this one.
Come on.
There is no balance, but she will fill you in. Go on.
Well, as some of you know, that I've never said no to my husband. I don't think women, wives, should say no to sex. That's something that has been from the beginning of our marriage. I think if you're making excuses, there might be underlying reasons for those excuses, because you should enjoy it as much as your husband. And if you're not, maybe it's something you need to pray for, because people don't realize you can actually pray for your sex life. You know, God has given us this, and it's the world that's made it look dirty and filthy, but it's not. It's something beautiful in the eyes of God, and it's something beautiful between a husband and a wife, between a man and a woman. There's a lot of excuses. I'm tired. Look, I've got 6 children, I'm always tired, but if once he has it, stop. Wait. But sometimes your wife is tired because she's doing everything. Yeah. Wait, what I'm saying is maybe if you know you want, help her out a little bit. Serious note, as a woman, as a wife, no, God has given you this husband.
No, say amen.
If he does desire sex, which is something that God has given you as a married couple, you just give it to him and you enjoy it.
Question 4. When trust has been broken, how do you mend the relationship?
I think it's very easy to break trust, but it takes a while to build it back. And so if trust is broken, don't expect things to just go back to normal immediately. It's going to take time. As you said, you can break down something very quickly, but it takes time to build it back. And so when trust is broken, you just need patience, you need prayer. But you're going to have to understand, okay, I'll violate trust, and now I'm going to have to build that back up. And so it's not something that just happens easy. I think it takes time.
You know, the thing about trust, very quickly, is society functions on trust. You meet someone, you give benefit of the doubt, we get on a plane, we trust the pilot. And so we take it for granted, trust. But when you violate trust, you're not even starting from zero. You're going minus. So just to get back to zero is a lot. You're expecting the benefit of the doubt again. Because you're so used to it, you think that's normal, you know? And violation of trust, man, is something you just don't do, because when you do, you go way down. And just to try and build it back up to basic level takes the time. And then to get it up to where it should be, that's even more time. So you got to bear that in mind as well. So to those who haven't broken trust, don't do it.
Question 5. My spouse is on a spiritual decline. I never see them do spiritual things, and they shut down when it comes to the things of God. I try to speak to them, but they won't listen. What do I do, and how can I inspire them?
I think sometimes inspiration comes by exampleship. And so your spouse is an adult. And so you can't really force them to do things. You can encourage them. And sometimes we underestimate the power of prayer. You can pray for them. Because, you can't even sometimes control your children, much less a spouse. And so I think when it comes to these spiritual decline or spiritual things, you have to encourage them, be an example. Encourage them, would you pray with me? Or would you come and read my Bible? But read your Bible with me. And so, I think it's more inspiration and exampleship.
Let me also add this. When I first got married, I know everyone thinks of this great spiritual person. When I first got married, after about a year, I started really struggling. I really started struggling. I was just holding on spiritually, holding on. And I remember every morning, and Cheryl's always been like this, Cheryl gets up early and she prays. And I remember resenting her prayer. I remember resenting her. We did a Bible study series on the 7 churches in Revelation, in Ephesians, about forsaking your first love. And God convicted me, and that's when I got back on track. But I'm saying that because one thing, Cheryl kept consistent, and she never dogged me. She never beat me up spiritually over the head that you loser, man, get praise, glory. She just prayed for me. She kept praying for me, but she didn't allow my carnality to hinder her relationship with God. She kept at it. She kept at it, praying for me, and God got a hold of my heart. So rather than beat your spouse over the head to be more spiritual, beat them with the Bible, you pray for them, you be the example. And I would say to the spouse who is not spiritual, the less inclined towards spirituality, the more carnal you become, the more anti-God you become. Because a carnal mind is enmity against God. And so if you're not praying and you're not reading your Bible, you're going to start resenting your own spouse and you'll undermine your own marriage. And I've seen that happen where a spouse will undermine the spiritual life of the other spouse, and then that spouse backside and becomes back to how they were in the world. You love them for who they are in church, but you don't realize it's their spiritual life that's made them the person they are. You don't want to see them outside of Christ. And you take it for granted. So you better get your spiritual act together, man, because you will undermine your marriage. I remember in Manchester, we had a guy who was a drug dealer before he got saved, gang member, powerful conversion, living for God, married a woman, and she resented his spiritual life and nagged him to basically cut back. He ended up right back into selling drugs and ended up in divorce. So you don't want to be spiritual, you are undermining your own marriage. So you better be very careful what you're doing. You better get on your knees and start praying out to God to soften your heart once again. So it's a warning, I'm telling you. You know?
Question 6. What is the difference between a helpmeet and mothering your husband? I know we spoke about leaving underwear on the floor, etc., but the reality is your husband is an adult, not a child. It seems there's a notion that only women should grow up and not men.
It seems there's a notion that only women should grow up and not men. No, not true.
I would say, as a mother, you tell your children every step what to do. If you start doing that to your husband, then you are acting like his mother. It's obviously as annoying about the leaving the underwear on the floor and everything. I think what my husband was saying earlier is that don't make that into an issue. But yes, you should leave your underwear. Just like we're teaching our children not to leave their clothes hanging around on the floor. It's the same thing. So, but I mean, I wouldn't nag. I would, because at the moment you come and you do this, they get defensive. So I'll just tell them how I'm feeling. I'm tired, because the reason you're really saying is because you're tired, really. You're tired of running after your husband, and I would just have a talk with him and just be honest, truth, and set the cards on the table. Like, I am tired, I'm doing a lot, and he can't really argue with that. And just say, just ask him, how can I support you, how can I help you? I'm here to help you, I'm here to support you. Just having honest conversations. I think sometimes we don't talk as openly as we should to our spouses. Because it makes you very vulnerable, and we don't like to be too vulnerable. No husband wants a wife to act like a mother. So I would definitely stay clear of that. And just find a balance, and just also praying for your husband, praying, because there's been so many testimonies where a wife has prayed about a situation and then God has revealed it to the husband. We serve a living God, a God that hears our prayers. So a lot of things like this, you just take to the Lord. But what you don't do, you don't make it a big issue within your marriage, And I think that's it, really.
Question 7. How can you encourage your spouse to be more Christ-like?
I mean, that's a tough question. How can you externally do something that needs to be done internally? The only thing I can really suggest is you pray and be an example, which it goes back to the question we looked at before.
Question 8. I can't open up to my wife about my deep feelings. She dismisses me. Because of this, I don't open up to her.
I think as men, if you feel like you're trying to express your feeling and you're being dismissed, then the natural tendency is to close up. And so I think as a wife, you have to be more considerate, more sensitive to how your husband may feel, especially if it feels like if he's trying to speak to you and he's trying to share his feelings, but you're not taking his feelings seriously. And so that can create a lot of problems in a marriage. So you have to be sensitive to his feelings and not be dismissive. Again, if you're just someone who's just dismissive, you need to ask God to really help you to be more open to your husband. But being dismissive to someone's feelings is going to cause them to close off. They start having the silent treatment, and they're going to hold back, and then it's going to hinder your marriage. So I think you need to really be more considerate of the feelings of your spouse.
The other thing is, the older you get, you're going to find yourself more distant. And if you have kids, once the kids grow up, you're going to realize just the amount of distance between each other over time. I'm going to tell you, I've been around long enough to see people who got married 20 odd years ago where they are now. You know what I'm saying? And for some people, it's scary. And so you better, you know, when it comes to really, because this is intimacy, being able to talk about your feelings, that's what's going to keep you together when you get older. So I'd encourage you to read it. Sometimes people's personalities, there's some people that are just get on with life, you know? But it's all about having some level of sympathy and asking God to really help you. Because sometimes we don't like to deal with emotional issues, you know?
Question 9. My spouse and I pull our income. My spouse does agency work on the side for extra income, but only gives a fixed amount to our household income. They spend the rest on whatever they want. I'm unhappy about this and think it's unfair because I have to stretch a modest budget to cover so many things for the home, and if possible, myself. Yet there seems to be no budgeting for my spouse. What is a better way of managing money, or should I not feel a way about this?
In our marriage, we have our accounts together. So we have joint accounts. Then my wife has an account that she uses that I don't care about.
So there's not much in it.
Yeah, but I think our accounts should be together. And so you should have joint accounts. So if you're having money on the side stashed away, where you're doing it, you're going for holidays or you're doing whatever else you need to do in it, and then your wife's money now is paying all of the bills, or might be the husband, his money's paying all the bills. I think, yeah, your account should be joint. And so it shouldn't be a thing where, even though I don't really go to her account, if I wanted to have access to it, I could. And so if it's a thing where you just have this account and you're thinking, okay, you know, I'll get my little pay on the side, this is my little personal stash, whereas your wife's money now or the husband's money is paying for everything else, then I think, yeah, you need to come to an agreement that either you say, okay, this account you can use it for whatever, or we're going to agree that this stash, instead of just pooling it and separating that stash, you pool it with everything. That's just a company total. Make sense?
It sounds like you pull it together, but he has a little extra on the side.
Yeah, it sounds like you pull it together stuff, but then there's another bit that's not being pulled together. That sounds like questions.
I think a husband's responsibility is to make sure that everything is taken care of. And if you've got a little bit to help to bless yourself, then by all means. But I've seen guys who will buy a new phone and leave the rent unpaid. You know what I'm saying? You don't need a new phone. You know what I'm saying? Back in the day, you had them old little thingy. I got those phones to ring my dad. Them little small, cheap. Yes, man. The £10 phone, that's all you need, man. You don't need a brand new iPhone. And listen, I'm not saying you can't have good stuff. I'm saying your responsibilities to your family. You need to Christ died for the church. You need to sacrifice for your family. That's first and foremost. You know what I'm saying? So if you're going to be blessed and your family suffers, that's not be like Jesus.
Question 10. I think my spouse is teaching our kids bad habits, like putting their mouth on the tap to drink water or eating sweet treats for breakfast. I worry they'll repeat this behaviour in public and get in trouble. Am I wrong for feeling like this? If I'm not, how do I get my spouse to agree on the same standards of parenting as me?
Yeah, I mean, if they're doing it at home, they will do it outside. They will. And so, I think it's just communication with your spouse. Is it? What does it say? Which one? Okay. So I think it's just communication with your spouse because, you know, the reality is as parents, no one wants to be embarrassed outside. You know, we want good reports. We want our children to be well behaved. So, yeah, it's just talking to your spouse and just letting them know. Because, you know, sometimes we are brought up in different cultures. You know, I've got friends that work on farms, they might do things like, I don't really do, you know. And so that's fair enough. So, but I think just sitting down with your spouse and communicating, just saying, darling, you know, this is probably not the greatest thing to do, especially, you know, drinking from the tap, you know, because the reality they're going to go out and drink from the tap. And the sweet treats, you know, in the morning, you can't really get. That's not real life, is it? You know, you need a good breakfast to start your day. Just having conversations with your husband, and, you know, for the reasons why, or wife, sorry, for the reasons why. I think, you know, I mean, you know, I think that should be enough, to be honest with you. I don't know. Well, I'm just, well, obviously it's a question, so it's an issue for someone, but I just think communicating, letting them know why you think this is probably not the best thing, and I think just understanding from the other spouse should be fine for that.
I think communication, everything is about communication. So if you can communicate your concerns and your reservations to your spouse, by God's grace, and you pray about it, I believe you can get through it. So main thing is communication.
When I was in Manchester, there was a family, they had about 5 kids. And the kids were tearaways. And I remember speaking to the husband about it, and he rebuked me. The boy cussed me clean. And I apologized, but I didn't tell him what I was apologizing about. I wasn't apologizing for what I said. I apologized for saying it. That's really what I meant, because you ain't gonna listen to what I have to say. So, about 7 years later, he contacted the pastor in Manchester to tell me I was right. But he had left his wife and kids at this point because he couldn't handle the kids anymore. And he left his wife with the 5 kids because the kids were now on the street doing madness. And the point I'm trying to get across is that these kids had no manners. They were just doing whatever they wanted to do. And I'm going to tell you this, guys, your kids are growing up. The longer, it's the whole idea of marriage, kids. The longer you have bad habits, as time goes on, they become more and more bigger and bigger, and then you create a monster. You can't turn the hands of time back on. You know the old proverb: "As a twig is bent, so the tree shall be inclined." In other words, if a little tree, before it's even a tree, the part is bent like this. You don't straighten it out. When it becomes a proper trunk, there's no way you're going to straighten it out. You better deal with these little things now, because I guarantee you, 10 years time, you got trouble in your hands. Yeah, so this is a madness, you know, that does need sorting out. I'm not trying to rebuke anyone. I'm trying to scare some people into fixing it up, man.
Question 11. My wife and I don't pray together regularly. She says she wants to pray as her spirit leads and have her own daily devotions. How often do you think we should make time to pray together, as daily doesn't work?
If the question means you pray together every day, me and my wife don't pray together every day. Of course not. And so it just depends on your schedule. Like for instance, I wake up earlier, my wife wakes up later. And so, for instance, if it's a husband who goes out to work, and the wife is at home, so I don't think you have to pray together every day. But there will be times where there are issues, or not even just issues, where you want to come together as a couple, even as a family, and you pray. So some people have this notion that, you know, man, if me and my wife are not praying together every day, there's a problem. It's not a problem. As long as you have your own personal devotion and she's praying, I don't think that should be a problem.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, 100%.
Question 12. My wife and I struggle to take time to read the Bible together, but we firmly believe a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken.
How can we ensure God is the third chord in our marriage?
Again, it's the same thing. I'll be honest with you, Cheryl and I don't pray together often. We're going to Reading. We said next week we're going to be praying every day together as we go to Reading for a week, believing God. But we don't often pray together or read the Bible together. We're still married for 29 years, and I'm still pray, she prays, you guys read your Bible, and you talk about the things of God. You don't have to make things official, but we do talk about things, so that's really the main thing.
Question 13. How do you resolve issues in a marriage, especially when your husband doesn't listen to your point of view on things and thinks he is in the right?
Yeah, well, if your husband is not listening, there's going to be problems. Because again, this all boils down to communication. And so if you're trying to communicate with your husband and your husband is not taking on board your concerns, then there's an issue there. And so husbands, if your wife has an issue, you need to be able to take on board her issue and address that. As a husband, you ought to be able to be a priest of your home. And so if there's problems, you should be able to listen, not be full of pride and think you're always right. I know sometimes you may think we're always right, but I still think you have to really listen or even show your wife that her issues or her concerns have been noted. Yes. And so as long as she can realize, okay, you've listened to what I've said, you've noted what I've said, you might not give me the answer or the solution I'm looking for, but you've noted what I've said or you've paid attention to me, that goes a very long way. Then you just dismissing her. And so, I think you really have to just pay attention to what your wife is saying.
Also, there's a few things. There's insecurities. Sometimes, man, I don't want to admit I'm wrong. I don't want to hear. So, is there insecurity driving, or even cultural issues, where you don't value a woman's opinion? There are things like this that comes into play. You really need to bring it before God. Husband, if you're a case like this, ask God to help you if there's an issue. You know what I'm saying? Be open to that. We're not always right. Trust me.
Question 14. What does it look like for a husband to lead a woman?
Wow. My opinion would be, and Pastor Jamil could add to this, you've got to be an example first and foremost. You've got to be an example in your own life. You've got to be a praying man. You've got to be in the Word. You've got what you say you do. You've got to have a testimony. It's to be someone to trust. Because the truth is, man, especially, nowadays, women are doing their own thing, but I'm saying in a sense that they have their own mind about stuff, and they're gonna trust a man to lead them. You gotta recognize that is a big deal for women, that they're gonna trust you. You know what I'm saying? I'll be honest. I've met very few wicked women. You know what I'm saying? But I do find women who are afraid that if they let their husband lead, they're going to end up in a train wreck. You know what I'm saying? If you're doing all the right things and your wife is now just doing her own thing, that's a whole different thing altogether. But for the most part, if a husband does his job and be an example and give confidence, you know what I'm saying? Not be perfect, because sometimes we make mistakes, we get things wrong. But Abraham did things wrong, but Sarah didn't beat him over the head. Sarah kept on trusting God. You got to learn to trust God as well, that God's going to help your husband get it right. If he's not an evil, wicked person, God's going to help him. So I think that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think it's exactly the same. Exampleship and credibility.
Yeah.
And so as long as you have credibility, because if you lose credibility, your wife's not going to want to follow you. And so I think, you just set a good example and make sure you keep that credibility and be a man of God.
Question 15. What do you do when your spouse and you disagree over biblical principles?
That's interesting.
Just doctrinal principles, or this is biblical principles?
Let's be theoretical. Let's say everything practical and doctrinal. Let's say, are you reading your Bible properly? I'm not trying to sound funny, but if you read things in context, it usually explains itself. You know? So disagreeing basically saying, and I could be wrong, but one of you don't really know your Bible. Or you want to ignore what the Bible says. Because this question is a bit vague, isn't it? So that's all I could say. Is that every verse has a context. It said text outside of its context is left without, yeah? So if you find the context and the meaning in the context, if you disagree about it, then you have an issue with the word of God. But I can't go any further than this.
Question 16. How can I communicate my upset to my husband? He doesn't seem to hear me or take me seriously unless I'm harsh in tone or raise my voice, which he also doesn't like. So what do I do?
So almost like one extreme to the other, isn't it? In the real world, I mean, your husband should listen to you, and if he's not, maybe just try and communicate how you're feeling. Like I said, I always go for how I'm feeling opposed to you never listen to me, you never do this, you never do that. I always go to how I'm feeling. I'm feeling unheard, I'm feeling unloved, and unwanted. And you can't really argue with that because, you know, it's how you're feeling. And so that's the kind of communication I would go. And because, you know, everybody wants to be heard, you know, and everyone wants to be valued. And I think this is what this wife is crying out for, just to be heard and to be valued and to be loved by a husband. And so as a husband, as a man of God, you know, you need to ask for wisdom from God to hear your wife, you know, even when you don't want to hear, because it might be, sometimes it's the wrong time for the men, because I know, when we're in bed sometimes at late at night, I'm like, so where do you think we'll be in 3 years' time? He's like, oh, I ain't got why he's fresh for this time at night. You know, so I think sometimes it might be the wrong time, you know, and just communicate with him and tell him how you're feeling. And there's not much you can, you know, argue in that. And obviously you don't want to go to the raised voice. He doesn't like it. It doesn't do anything. It's like a vicious cycle. You're back to square one, unheard, you know, and undervalued, you know, you may feel here. So just communicate to him how you feel and pray. You know, praying, I know we say it, but it goes so far when you pray, say, Lord, I'm just going to put this in your hands because at the moment I don't know what to do with it. So.
Yeah, I think as well, one of the things I do, if I'm communicating something that I'm not sure what the outcome would be, I pray, God, give me the right words when I'm going to speak to my wife, or even if it's not even my wife, anyone else. Is that, give me the right words to speak. Help me to say things in a way that will cause them to hear what I'm saying, understand what I'm saying. So sometimes we just need God's direction of how maybe to phrase a question or an issue that we may have. And then God can kind of give us wisdom where something that we might have said in the wrong spirit, our spirit is right when we say it. But sometimes if you go in a wrong spirit and you go harshly, I think one of the first things our husband might do is put up barriers. And you get defensive. And so you really need God's grace that when you go in the right spirit. If you're going in critical straight from the beginning, barriers are going to come up. And so you really need God's grace and just wisdom of how you approach the questions.
Don't wait until an issue comes. You know it's going to eventually come again. So in a good time, if you go out to dinner and just say, honey, and just to communicate at that time where there is no issues at all. Just to prepare him for when the inevitable does happen. You know what I'm saying?
Question 17. My wife and I would like to incorporate a bit of dirty talk in the bedroom. We don't say anything that we would consider sinful, nor do we swear. But we want to know if Ephesians 4:29 would extend towards spoken in the bedroom. This is what Ephesians 4:29 says, reading from NIV. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen.
Is it edifying? Does it communicate grace? If not, then it should be spoken. You know what I'm saying? So consider me a Puritan. But that's what Ephesians 4:29 says. It didn't give any caveats. If you're in the bedroom, that it doesn't apply. So that's just me.
Question 18. Sometimes I feel like a single married parent. My husband's job and making money seems to take precedence over spending quality time with his children. I feel like I'm parenting on my own a lot of the time. I've tried to speak to my husband about this, but nothing changes. Can you please help?
As a parent, as a father, I think you should actually want to spend time with your children. And so if it's a thing where I understand, okay, maybe if you come home late from work and you go out early, you come home late, you're out of time. But even then, I think you still want to take some time out to spend with your children. And so, you know, the thing about myself and my wife is obviously I'm a pastor full time, and so I'm always at home. I homeschool our children, and so I'm always there. But even when you're there, you can actually not be there. Sometimes my wife will say, "Oh, can you take them out to the park or something because they'll do your head in." You know, just being home with them. And so I think as a father, you actually have to make that time, especially if you see your wife struggling. There are times where, you know, Inka, you can tell that she's struggling. The kids was giving her a hard time in the day. And, you know, sometimes I'm thinking I've got stuff to do. But at times I'll have to take them to the park. And so I think it's just that responsibility. As a father, you want to spend time with them. And so I think if you're just leaving it to your wife to do everything, she is going to get burnt out. She'll get frustrated, and then it's going to affect your marriage. And so I think wisdom would tell you, you know, if I see that she's struggling, or even if you work Monday to Friday, at least on the weekends, Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to spend time with my children. But I don't think this is something that your wife needs to beg you to do. I think this should be something that as a parent, you want to spend time with your children. And so if you don't have that desire, it might be something that you need to really pray about and spend time with God about. I know certain culture, I remember there's a man, he spoke to me years ago, and he was saying to me, when I grew up, I couldn't even say, I love you from my father, I never even heard that. And so he was just telling me, I found it very difficult to relate to my children. And so it's probably just one of those things in their culture that he found it very difficult. But again, you know, now his children are grown up, he speaks to me sometimes, he tells me, you know, it's just kind of strained. They really more navigate to their mother, they don't really spend time with me. But he said, just growing up, I didn't have that, and so I didn't know how to show it. And so if you need help with that, you probably need to speak to someone who's been married or a father, so that you can get help. Because, you know, if your wife is in this place where she feels she's a single parent, it's going to be frustrated, and it's going to affect your marriage.
Let me be a bit more brutal. Going back, before Brandon, my oldest son, was born, sure I can tell you this, there's a song that scared me. It's called Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. I encourage every father here to listen to it. Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. And he talks about a man who has a son, and you know, when his son was born and his son was growing up, his son says, "I'm going to be like my dad one day." But his dad was always busy, never had time for his son. And then his son grew to be an adult, and now he's retired, and he wants to spend time like his son, with his son, but his son's busy now. And his son says, "That boy, Dad ain't got no time," and you realize my son ended up just like me, you know? And I always remember that song, because the truth is, your kids are gonna grow up, and one day you're gonna realize just how estranged you are from your kids. And you're gonna realize that the older I'm getting, I'm 52, you know, people talk about empowerment, money, you know, you see women want to be CEOs, and big up yourself. But I'm telling you, the most important thing is family. The most important thing. And you rue the day when you don't have a good relationship with your kids. That when now they're adults, man, they don't have no time for you, because it will happen. Guaranteed. Guaranteed it will happen. So money, you gotta realize, only amounts to so much. What really matters is a relationship, but then it's too late.
Question 19. How should we navigate gender roles in society where both men and women have to work? Should men stick to only women can cook, or women stick to only men should do the handiwork? Is it okay to operate by these standards?
Yeah, I think if you can come to a mutual agreement. I think in the Western world it's a bit different, depending. I don't know if it's a one-size-fits-all. It just depends. Yeah, I think you can come to mutual goals. I know some men love cooking. Actually, I know a man right here in my church in Reading who loves cooking. And so, if you can agree, someone else is saying he loves cooking. And so, it's not just one thing. If you're a man and you like cooking, I know when I went to Tucson, I remember Pastor Wanda going to his house, and he says he loves cooking. It's a way that he just relaxes. And so I went there, he cooked a meal for me when I went to Beach Revival years ago. And it's just one of those things that he does. And so I think if you come to an agreement with the husband, if he loves cooking and he said, okay, I want to cook, then I don't think it's a problem. I don't know if you say that both men and women have to work. I think if it's financial, then you might have to work for a season. But my wife, she doesn't work. You know, as I said, she's a scientist. She left her work to take care of the children. And so how we kind of figured it out is by the time she works, if she was going to work, and then you have to spend all of this money on childcare, taking care of the kids, it's better for her to just stay home and I work. And so it's nothing where you have to, but if you can, because of finances, you understand. But I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all, or you just have to go according to the law. I think there's compromise, there's wiggle room where you can come to agreement and, you know, work these kind of things out.
Sometimes my husband cooks, but I don't really fancy doing handiwork. So I wouldn't want to swap anything. I mean, if he can, one day a week he does cook, and that helps me out, and he knows that I'm grateful for it. And my older two daughters cook on a day. You know, because it's hard. You know, it's tiring, and and so any help as a mother I can get. I mean, you're working, so I'm not even sure how you're doing that. That's hard, but. Yeah, it's difficult, to be honest with you. Yeah, every little helps, but I'm not going to start getting a nail and hammer out. That's the only thing. I don't think I need to swap, but if he can help me, then that's great, yeah.
I do a little bit of cooking, Sean does a little bit of DIY, you know what I'm saying? Sean's actually better than me with that, you know? Soft hands.
Question 20. Whenever I have an issue to raise and try to speak to my husband about it, usually he'll throw it back in my face and say it's my fault. This causes me to retreat and keep a lot of things inside. I feel like I'm suffering in silence. I'm so unhappy in my marriage at the moment and don't know what to do. Can you offer any advice at all?
Great question.
This is similar to what I mentioned in that book, The Fear Dance. So I hurt, I want, I fear, I react. And so, yeah, if you have an issue and your issue is not being addressed by your husband, then you start with your hurt, then you want. As I said, in the minds of a spouse, according to this book, you are both the problem and the solution. And so if you're not bringing the solution, then you're going to the cycle is just going to continue. So as a husband, I think you need to, as I said earlier, you need to take into account the issues that your wife raises. Because if you don't address them, it's just going to go in a circle and it's going to affect your marriage. And so, you can't be, if you're throwing something back in your wife's face, then one of the things that may happen, if this happens quite regularly, then she'll just become cold. She'll just close off, she'll keep everything in, and then you're going to start complaining, oh, but you're giving me the silent treatment. But no, when I try to speak to you, you don't address the issue or you throw it back in my face. And so if I feel like I'm saying something to you, and instead of addressing what I'm saying to you, you're throwing it back in my face. Some people, their natural tendencies, either they're going to shout, they're going to argue, or they're just going to hold everything in. And so a marriage where everything is holding is not a healthy marriage. And so you got to really pray, just ask God, help me not to be someone who just gets defensive. My wife brings an issue, I throw it back in her face. That's a defensive mechanism. But, again, communication where you can address these issues.
I would also just quickly add that anyone who does that, who always turn things around, you're never going to resolve issues in a marriage. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes, even if you're wrong or you're right, just learn to sometimes absorb stuff for the sake of the marriage. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying take nonsense. I'm just saying that sometimes you may have a little bit of flaw in it. You can't be right all the time. You can't be right all the time. You can't just take something and someone has a legitimate complaint and you just push it back. You know what I'm saying? You can't do that because then you're just going to create tension in the marriage. We all got to take ownership at some point in our lives, man. And sometimes we got to just take it on board and hear what the spouse has to say. And sometimes you may not need to deal with it right there. You may even push back right there and say no. But when you go away, you think about it and pray and come back and say, oh, you know what, you're right. You're absolutely right. But if you can't do that, it's pride. And pride comes before a fall.
Question 21.
Sex seems to be such a taboo subject in church, even though couples may experience some issues with it. How do we talk about sex within the church without going into the world and opening a can of worms?
Church services isn't a forum because of teenagers, young kids, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
If we're not talking about it, you're going to learn at school. That's one thing.
No, parents should teach their kids. Parents should teach their kids. It's not the church's responsibility to teach kids about sex. Just like it's not the school's responsibility to be teaching kids about sex. Parents should be teaching their kids about that stuff. And so it's not my responsibility to be teaching anybody's kids. And I'm not going to do that. But in regards to church, you know, especially a church the size of South London, there's so many couples, man, logistically it's going to be very hard. I would say, though, however, there may be some kind of forum to create where issues can be talked about. Pastor Al, Sister MJ, the family pastors, sometimes it'd be good to just go and talk to them about things. You know, they can schedule an appointment and feed you in. But in terms of a group dynamics, I don't see the necessity of having to do that just in a group dynamics. Marriage seminar like this is fine, but it's very hard, man, when you take into account all kind of things going on, you know? And so I don't think we're necessarily prudish, it's just church services isn't really the forum for it.
Question 22. In a practical sense, how can we ensure our marital union gives glory to God and grows His kingdom?
Wow, that's a very, very astute question, very spiritual question.
Well, I think it's your example. If you have a good example as a marriage, it will bring glory to God. Especially if you have a marriage and people can look at you and see that you're both faithful, you both love God, you both love each other. I think just seeing the exampleship, especially in the society where we live in, where marriage, they say, I don't know what the figure is now, if it's 5 out of 10 or whether it's 6 out of 10. If just seeing an example of a good marriage actually brings glory to God. And so especially they know that you're Christians and the reason why you'll stay together is because of your relationship with God and you have that good example. I think that alone will attract people and bring people to the kingdom. You know, people are always asking, like people from various churches, not even just my church, but people will phone me or pastors will give people my number, they'll phone me and they'll ask me questions about our marriage and about our children and about being married and raising children. And I think it's just seeing someone, you know, I was married at 23, 22 years later, still loving my wife, still serving God, we're still together. And so just seeing that testimony, that exampleship brings God's glory and will attract people to the things of God. And so I think like just you two being together, faithful, loving God, that alone will bring glory to God.
Question 23. Pastor Jamil, you have spoken a lot about removing expectations and being blind to flaws and imperfections in marriages. Can you offer any practical advice or tips to a spouse that may be struggling with perfectionism about how to do this?
I didn't say remove expectations. I said when we have unrealistic expectations, that is when problems come in. So sometimes we're going to have expectations, but if you have unrealistic expectations, that is where we can have problems. And then being blind, I'm not saying you're blind to everything, but I'm saying there are issues that can be overlooked and you don't need to make a bigger issue than something is. And so there are issues, as I said, you're going to have to address, but there are times where it's just small things. You know that if you overlook it, it won't impact your marriage in a negative way. But if you do continue to pursue it, it may cause a problem, it may cause arguments, and so it'll lead to other places. Practical advice, if someone struggles with perfectionism, is, as I said, there is no one perfect. And so if you're struggling with perfectionism, especially when it's other-orientated, then you're looking at others expecting perfectionism from them, when you yourself isn't. And so if you have that perfectionist mindset, then you have to kind of look inwardly and realize, I'm requiring something from my spouse that I myself cannot give. You remove expectations if you have these unrealistic expectations.
Question 24. How do you know when to turn a blind eye versus when to lovingly bring something up for discussion, especially if it's repeated behaviour?
Yeah, repeated behaviour. If you're trying to address an issue and it just keeps coming up, I don't think you want to address it every time. Sometimes you give it a bit of time before you address it again. And the example I use is sometimes you go to your family member's house, they might not be saved, and you're witnessing to them, and every time you go there, you witness to them. Sometimes you just need to give them some time, and then you come back. And so certain issues, instead of just continually bringing it up over and over again, it's not being dealt with. I think sometimes you need to just give it a bit of space, pray about it, get wisdom, and then you might revisit it. But I think you just need discernment. You need discernment when you can just turn a blind eyes to something, and when you can just bring it up to discuss it. So if it's something that you feel, okay, I can't let this go, you might need to address it. But at other times, again, if it's something that you feel that I don't need to address, or I can absorb it, I can see this thing in my spouse and not react to it, can live with it, then you can just turn a blind eye. So again, you just need discernment, and you can kind of work out according to when you're going to deal with something, when you're going to understand this time of ignorance which blink at.
Question 25. In addition to the Bible, are there any resources, books, videos, etc. that you could recommend for godly wisdom on marriage?
DNA of Relationships about marriage, and that's a very good book. Another book called Men in Marriage, which is quite good.
Question 26, a 2-in-1 question. Number 1, any tips on how to romance each other during the day when not together? For example, at work. Not necessarily sexual, but to keep things sweet. And number 2, I wish my husband was more romantic. Can you give him any tips?
I wish my husband was more romantic. Can you give any tips? Great. So there's a bit you said with work. Any tips on how to romance each other during the day when not at work together? Yeah, sometimes, just checking in. Just checking in on your wife. Seeing how she's doing. Sometimes my wife actually gets surprised when I check in on her. She said, oh, you checked in? Oh, it's almost like this is a surprise. And so I realize she appreciates that. So if I'm out, just checking in and just saying, how are you doing? Are you okay? I love you. On my bed, on the back of the bed, she has always kissed me goodnight. So she has this sticker on there. And so, daily affection. You might just go hug her, give her a kiss. I'll go behind her when she's done cooking and just grab her. Hello babes, how are you? So, be creative. Don't wait for someone to give you ideas. Think outside the box.
Question 27. After a disagreement, I struggle to let things go quickly, whereas my husband shortly after is ready to hug, make up, hold hands, etc. But I am not. Although I know that I will get over the disappointment in the same day, do you have any tips to speed this process up?
Good question. Being strong, we don't hold on to things quick, you know what I mean? Make it happen. And in 5 minutes, 6 it's all done. You know what I'm saying? So we're all flawed people. And I recognize I'm far more flawed than Cheryl. You know what I'm saying? Far more. Yeah, well far. You know what I'm saying? I'd spend all day, I can tell you all my flaws, man, one after the other, man, to be all day. And, just go realize, man, life is just too short to just hold on to stuff, You got to recognize that. And you got to recognize, as Pastor Jubal preached yesterday, we all have our own flaws. And you have no idea what your own spouse has winked at, overlooked. So you've got to just learn to get over yourself. I don't want to try to sound facetious today, but you got to pray about it, man. You just got to get over yourself, you know what I mean? I have to get over myself. I'll be honest, man, I can be nitpicking little things about this and that. That's just my mom and me. I said, oh God, you got to help me, man, because I'm just jacked up. But we got to get over ourselves, you know what I mean? We got to get over ourselves, man, because life is just too short,
Question 28. When my husband and I make love, he will always make sure his desires are met and he's satisfied, when mine are not. He doesn't even know whether I have had an orgasm or not.
Have you told your husband that? So, if you haven't told him, he may not know. And so, again, it's communication.
You can talk to each other and say what you like. And I think if you do that, then your husband will know what you like in the bedroom and he should fulfill it. I mean, I think communication, maybe when you have spent the night together, afterwards, that's when you talk, because that's when they're most vulnerable. And
timing. Man. Listen to her now. No, man.
They will listen. Sometimes we can be embarrassing. It's okay to say to after the deed is done, you can talk about it and say, did you enjoy that? Like, better. Remember, this is from God. It's good.
Question 29. My wife is not submissive. Well, this is a statement.
I don't know what that means. My wife is not submissive. I'll be honest, is it she's Jezebel? I'm not trying to sound bad, but this is a statement. There could be a million reasons why. It could be that you are not a good husband. It could be that she's a bad wife. I don't know. There's so many different ways this could go. My wife is submissive. Is her upbringing? Well, I find that a lot of times the husband fixes up, the wife fixes up as well. Most of the time. Most of the time, if the husband gets his act together, the wife gets herself together as well. And so I know this isn't necessarily the answer, but I would say that maybe you need to look to yourself and see how can you be a better husband. And in that, in prayer, as Pastor Jabril says, maybe there can be a change. But for the most part, I've seen from 31 years of salvation, and I've seen dysfunctional marriages, if the husband fixes up, the wife usually fixes up. So I'm saying that things. So that's all I can say.
Turn up the watch my flow. You know that I'll be back.